What would you do if you had just $200 to your name? Your last safety net in a world that's already taken almost everything from you. Would you spend it all on an abandoned restaurant that nobody wanted? That's exactly what one desperate mother did. But what she discovered inside those crumbling walls wasn't just dust and decay. It was a secret worth billions of dollars and dangerous enough to get someone killed. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from. Rachel Brooks had always dreamed of a better life for her two children, Mia and Ryan. But life had a way of throwing roadblocks in her path. At 35 years old, she found herself stuck in a cycle of barely getting by. Every day felt like she was running in place, just trying to make sure her kids had food, a roof over their heads, and a little bit of happiness. Her story wasn't unique. A lot of single mothers knew the struggle. The long hours, the juggling of jobs, and the constant pressure to make ends meet. Rachel had worked as a waitress for years, putting in extra hours just to cover the rent and pay for her kids' school supplies. But it wasn't enough, not anymore. Just last month, her landlord had raised the rent again. And with the money from her job barely covering the bills, Rachel knew she couldn't keep going like this. She had to find something else, but what? One evening after a long shift at the diner, Rachel sat down on the couch, exhausted. She flipped through the local newspaper, hoping to find something, a new job, a way out. Then she saw it. The ad was small, almost tucked away in the corner of the page. Local restaurant for sale, $200 starting bid. Auction tomorrow. She rubbed her eyes, unsure of what she had just read. The restaurant was an old, run-down place called Millie's Kitchen. Rachel had heard of it before. It used to be a popular spot for locals, but it had been abandoned for years. No one had bothered to buy it. Most people thought the place was cursed. Others just thought it was too far gone to be worth anything. But Rachel saw something different. She had no savings left, just $200 in her account. That was everything she had. It was a risk, a huge risk. But if she didn't try now, she might never have another chance. Rachel couldn't stop thinking about it. She had to make a decision. The next day, Rachel drove to the county courthouse. Her hands were shaking as she parked outside. She couldn't believe she was about to do this. But she had no other choice. Walking into the crowded auction room, she felt completely out of place. Most of the people there were investors, wearing suits and ties, looking like they knew what they were doing. Rachel, on the other hand, was just a waitress with $200 left in the world. She found a seat at the back, trying to stay out of the way. She could hear the auctioneer's voice going on and on about properties. But she wasn't paying attention to those. No, her mind was on Millie's Kitchen, the one property that might give her a shot at something more. Then it came. The auctioneer called for bids on the diner. Millie's Kitchen, starting at $200. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She raised her hand. It felt like a small gesture in a room full of big players. But she had no choice. She needed this. The auctioneer glanced at her, then at the room. No one else raised their hand. "Do I hear $250? He asked. No one spoke. Rachel's heart raced. She raised her hand again. $200. The auctioneer paused, his eyes scanning the room. "Sold, to the lady in the back." Rachel felt a wave of shock wash over her. Had she really just done it? She had bought the restaurant. The keys were now hers. She had taken the leap. The next few days were a blur of excitement and fear. Rachel couldn't believe she now owned the old restaurant. It was in bad shape, no doubt about that. The roof leaked, the windows were cracked, and the walls were covered in years of dust. But Rachel didn't care. She was determined to make it work. She had no other choice. With Mia and Ryan by her side, Rachel spent the next week cleaning the place. They scrubbed the floors, wiped down the counters, and cleared out the debris. It was hard work, but Rachel felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Then, one afternoon, while cleaning out the back office, Rachel found something strange. Behind the old cash register, there was a hidden drawer, locked with an old key. Curiosity got the best of her, and she pried it open. Inside, she found an envelope filled with old receipts, photographs, and handwritten notes. The photos showed the original owner, Millie, and her family, smiling, happy, in front of the restaurant. But there was something else, papers detailing recipes, and not just any recipes. These were different. They were special. Millie had written detailed instructions on how to make some of the most unique and flavorful dishes Rachel had ever seen. There was a recipe for a dish called crispy shrimp with mango salsa, a blend of fresh flavors that seemed too advanced for a diner. Another was for a chocolate lava cake, something that didn't belong in a small-town restaurant. Rachel had no idea what she had just stumbled upon, but one thing was clear. These weren't just regular recipes. They were the key to something bigger. As Rachel continued to go through the drawer, she discovered more. There were even more recipes, each more complicated and creative than the last. Some of the notes were barely legible, written in Millie's scrawled handwriting, but Rachel could make out the most important parts. One of the papers detailed a recipe for lobster bisque, unlike anything Rachel had ever seen before. The instructions were so precise, right down to the type of lobster to use, the method of simmering the broth, and the special herbs that would give it that rich, unforgettable taste. Rachel sat down, staring at the papers. She couldn't believe it. Here she was, just a single mother trying to make ends meet, and she had just found a treasure chest of secret recipes, recipes that could transform her failing diner into something special. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. She'd always been a decent cook, but these dishes were next level. They had the potential to turn Millie's kitchen from an old, abandoned place into a thriving business. She had the recipes, but there was one more problem: money. Rachel didn't have the funds to buy the expensive ingredients Millie's recipes called for. She was still barely scraping by, and this restaurant, though it had potential, was a long shot. But Rachel wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Rachel decided to start small. She couldn't afford to make every dish on Millie's list just yet, but she could begin with a few simpler items. One evening, she went to the local market and bought a few of the ingredients from Millie's recipes. It wasn't much, just enough to make the crispy shrimp with mango salsa and a batch of the lobster bisque. She was determined to test them out, to see if she could really make something special. The next morning, Rachel prepared the dishes in the small kitchen of the diner. Mia and Ryan helped her as much as they could, cleaning tables and setting up the chairs. The diner was still in bad shape, but Rachel knew that even if it didn't look perfect, the food had to be. It had to be something people would want to come back for. By noon, she was ready. Rachel opened the doors to the diner and waited. The first few hours were slow. Not many people came in, and Rachel started to worry. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe she had made a mistake. But then, a couple of locals walked in, curious, probably wondering why the diner had reopened after all these years. Rachel greeted them with a smile, handed them the menu, and waited nervously. They ordered the shrimp dish and the bisque. Rachel went back to the kitchen and prayed that it would be good. When she brought the food to their table, the couple's faces lit up. They took one bite and looked at each other in disbelief. "This is incredible," the woman exclaimed. "Where did you get these recipes?" Rachel smiled, her heart beating faster. "I've had a little help," she said, trying to play it cool. "It's a secret." The couple finished their meal, and after paying, they left with smiles and promises to return. Rachel's heart soared. It was just a start, but it was a start nonetheless. Over the next few weeks, more and more people came in to try the new dishes. Word spread quickly. Soon the little diner was buzzing with customers, many of them praising the new flavors. Rachel couldn't believe it. She was making it work. But Rachel knew she couldn't keep this up forever without more help. The restaurant was still too much for her to handle alone. She had to find someone who could assist her, someone she could trust. But she wasn't sure who would want to work at a restaurant so far behind on repairs. It was during a busy Friday afternoon when Rachel met him. His name was Sam Reynolds, and he was different from anyone Rachel had ever met. He came into the diner for lunch and sat by himself in a corner booth, quietly observing the busy scene. When Rachel went to take his order, he looked up with a kind smile. "How's the food?" Rachel asked, eager to hear what he thought. Sam gave a thoughtful nod. "It's amazing. You've got something special here," he said. Rachel smiled, feeling a wave of pride. "Thank you. I'm doing my best to bring it back to life." Sam's eyes softened, and he glanced around at the worn-out chairs and peeling wallpaper. "I can see that. But it's not just about the food, is it?" he asked. "It's about the heart you're putting into it." Rachel was taken aback. Most people would have just noticed the broken-down parts of the diner. But Sam saw beyond that. "Well, I'm trying," Rachel said, "but I'm doing it all on my own, and it's getting harder to keep up with everything." Sam smiled again. "I know what you mean. I've worked in restaurants before. If you need some help, let me know. I'm good with repairs, and I have a little experience in the kitchen too." Rachel was stunned. Could this be the break she needed? Someone who could help her bring the diner back to life? She hesitated, unsure if she should trust him. But something about Sam felt different, like he genuinely wanted to help. "All right," Rachel said, finally making up her mind. "I could use a hand around here." Sam agreed to help, and from that day on, he became an essential part of the team. He fixed broken equipment, helped clean up, and even assisted in the kitchen when things got busy. Rachel had found a friend, and that made all the difference. As the diner grew in popularity, Rachel began to notice something strange. People had started showing up, offering her money in exchange for her secret recipes. Some of them were polite, while others were more forceful, insisting that she sell them the recipes. At first, Rachel thought it was just business, but then the offers began to feel more like threats. One day, a man in a suit came into the diner and sat down at the counter. He introduced himself as Mr. Carter, a businessman who specialized in acquiring small businesses. "I've heard a lot about your restaurant," he said, his eyes scanning the kitchen behind Rachel. "I think we could make a deal. I'm willing to pay a substantial amount for those recipes of yours, a lot more than what you're making here." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. Something about him didn't sit right. She politely turned him down, but the man didn't leave without warning her again. "Think about it," he said. "You don't want to get in over your head." Rachel's diner continued to grow in popularity. What had once been a crumbling, abandoned restaurant was now a local hotspot, and the more people came, the more attention it drew. It wasn't just the food, it was the mystery behind the recipes. Word was getting out, and Rachel started hearing whispers about Millie's kitchen in local circles. People wondered where she got her recipes, and why the dishes tasted unlike anything they'd ever had before. But with success came pressure. The mysterious men who had started offering her money for the recipes weren't the only ones watching. Rachel began to receive more threatening visits. One day, Sam pulled Rachel aside as they were cleaning up after dinner. "You need to be careful," Sam said, his voice low. "I overheard a couple of guys talking outside the restaurant last night. They seemed pretty interested in you, your recipes mostly. They were asking about you in town." Rachel froze. "What were they saying?" "They were talking about making an offer," Sam said. "I don't know, but it didn't sound like something good." Rachel felt a lump in her throat. She'd been warned before, but this felt different. These weren't just people offering money. They were people who wanted her secrets, and they were starting to get more aggressive. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What if Sam was right? What if the success of the diner wasn't a blessing at all, but the beginning of something dangerous? The next morning, Rachel made a decision. She needed to find out who these people were and why they were so interested in Millie's recipes. If she didn't, her success might be short-lived, and worse, her children's safety could be at risk. Rachel started asking around. She spoke to old-timers in town, trying to gather any information about Millie, the original owner of the diner. What had happened to her? Why had she been so secretive about her recipes? Rachel had to understand more about the woman whose legacy she was now carrying. One afternoon, Rachel visited the local library and asked the librarian if she had any information about Millie. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Parker, looked at Rachel with a knowing smile. "Millie was a legend around here," Mrs. Parker said, her voice soft and nostalgic. "She wasn't just a cook, she was an inventor, a visionary. But she had her enemies too. People thought she was hiding something. And I guess they were right." "What do you mean?" Rachel asked, leaning in. "Well," Mrs. Parker continued, "Millie had a lot of money at one point. She'd developed all kinds of crazy ideas for new dishes, special ways to prepare food. But there was a lot of jealousy. You see, she was connected to some people in the food industry who were, well, let's just say they were willing to do anything to get their hands on her work." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. "You think Millie was hiding something?" Rachel asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Not just hiding it," Mrs. Parker replied. "She was protecting it. She knew that someone would come after her recipes. That's why she kept them locked away. She trusted no one, not even the people she worked with." Rachel didn't know what to think. She had come to find out more about Millie's life, but this was more than she had bargained for. Was Millie's legacy really something worth fighting for? Or had Rachel unknowingly walked into something dangerous? A week later, Rachel was alone in the diner, cleaning up after closing time, when the bell above the door rang. She turned around and saw a figure standing in the doorway, tall, with a serious expression. "Can I help you?" Rachel asked, trying to sound calm, though her heart was racing. The man stepped inside. his eyes scanning the diner with a sharp gaze. He was wearing a dark coat and had an air of authority about him. "My name is Luke Bennett," the man said. "I'm with a private investigation agency. I've been looking into the history of Millie's kitchen, and I think we need to talk." Rachel's stomach tightened. Private investigator? What was going on? "I don't understand," Rachel said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you want with me?" Luke took a deep breath, as if weighing his words carefully. "I'm not here to cause trouble, but I've been following your progress with the diner. You've uncovered something important, something that some very powerful people want." Rachel felt a chill run through her. "What do you mean? I'm just running a small diner. It's nothing special." Luke shook his head. "It's far more than that. Millie's recipes, they're not just good food. They're part of something bigger, something that could change the food industry forever. And there are people who will stop at nothing to get them." Rachel's mind was spinning. This wasn't just about a failing restaurant anymore. She was caught in the middle of something far larger than she had imagined. "Who are these people?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "I can't tell you everything just yet," Luke said, his expression grim. "But I can tell you this. If you don't protect those recipes, there are people who will take them from you, and they won't hesitate to do whatever it takes." Rachel was shaken by the visit, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't let anyone take Millie's legacy from her. Not now, not when she had worked so hard to turn the diner around. That night, she sat down with Sam, telling him everything she had learned. Sam's face grew serious as he listened. "You're not alone in this," he said, his voice firm. "I'll help you. We'll figure out what to do next. But you need to be careful. If these people are as dangerous as Luke says, we can't just sit back and let them take what's ours." Rachel nodded, feeling a sense of relief that she wasn't facing this alone. Together, they started making plans. They would protect the recipes, and they would fight to keep the diner running. Rachel knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she wasn't going to back down. Not now. In the following weeks, the pressure from the people who wanted Millie's recipes only intensified. But Rachel was ready. She had gathered everything she needed to protect herself and her children, including legal documents that could secure her ownership of the diner. The final confrontation came one rainy evening when a man in a suit walked into the diner, another representative from the shadowy organization. This time, though, Rachel was prepared. "I'm not selling," she said, her voice steady, "and I don't care what threats you bring. These recipes belong to me, and they belong to the people who appreciate them." The man smirked, but there was something in his eyes, something cold. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. You're playing with forces far beyond your control." Rachel stood her ground. "Maybe, but I'll be damned if I let you take it all away." With that, the man left, and Rachel knew the battle wasn't over. But for the first time, she felt confident. She wasn't going to let anyone take what she had worked so hard for. She had built this business from the ground up, and with her children by her side and her recipes protected, Rachel was finally in control of her future. No one would stop her now. Months later, Millie's Kitchen became one of the most successful restaurants in town. It was no longer just a place to eat. It was a legacy, a tribute to Millie's hidden genius and Rachel's hard work. The diner thrived, and with the support of Sam and the people who believed in her, Rachel's dream had finally come true. The threats had faded, but Rachel never forgot the lessons she had learned. She had fought for what she believed in, and in the end, it had all been worth it. Before God blesses you, He will sometimes take you through difficult trials to shape you for the bigger plans He has in store. Trust that every challenge is preparing you for something greater. Stay consistent, keep your faith strong, and believe that His purpose for you is bigger than anything you can imagine. The breakthrough is coming, just trust His timing and His plan. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more captivating tales and thrilling adventures. Stay tuned for what's coming next.